Morning all. Okay, let's continue looking at a few Nigel short games from the recent Tradewise Gibraltar tournament. This game really impressed me because it seemed quite easy, but actually, you know, Black could have put in a better resistance than he did. He seemed to crack up, and I wonder actually if maybe he got a bit tired as well after the tactical complexities. It seems you know, Nigel went down the exchange, but it was a favourable going the exchange down, as if he had actively gone for a positional exchange sacrifice. So we'll see how this occurred. So e4, e5, and after knight f3, knight c6. Bit of a surprise move now, going into the four knights variation. So knight c3, which has its own particular dangers. You know, the quick knight d5 possibilities, you know, maybe bishop g5 later, makes, you know, this system have its own kind of venom. And actually I've been playing someone in Bullet recently in this, and here, okay, I've been playing knight f6, and after bishop b5 there's an interesting move which is maybe more solid than a6 in some ways. Bishop d6, which looks awkward, but actually checking on chessgames.com, it seemed like a legitimate idea, which has been played before with good success for Black. Anyway, in this game, Mikhalevski, who's rated 2579, he actually plays knight d4, which also has been played before, of course, but you know, just without sort of knowing the theoretical intricacies of this, it looks as though Black's losing some tempo here, just to exchange off his knight for the knight on f3. So White's got a bit of initiative, a lead in development, but without open lines there's not too many exploitable targets here. Black's solid, and one of the points of knight d4 is this quick c6 and d5 idea. And actually that has the seeds of its own destruction, actually, as evidenced by this game, because if Black really is a bit too ambitious in the centre and goes for a pawn later on e4, then the evidence of this game is that, you know, maybe f3 is dangerous to undermine Black's pawn chain in the centre, and the f file f7 is later targets. So we're going to see that, how that happened here. After castles d6, okay, now Nigel played h3 to cut out any bishop g4s. After bishop e7, now there's knight e2, so he can safely play that without bishop g4, and then the knight can now swing maybe to f5. After castles, now c3, as though d4 is going to be the plan, and in fact, indeed, after h6, which looks like a weakening move, you know, falling into White's plans actually, but without h6, there's going to be, I think there's going to be a concern later about d4 and bishop g5s. Trying to rule out the use of the g5 square is probably important to Black. Okay, so d4 from Nigel, and now we see, you know, Black contesting the centre with pawns. So is this a good thing? d5, okay, and now this little trick to get an advanced pawn to e4. After e takes, we see e4, an intermediate move, but it's got a positional downside. If White's got that biting move f3 later, then, you know, the f file and f7 in particular is going to be a target. So queen g3, also, you know, annoying threats of bishop takes h6 have been introduced with this move. Black plays bishop d6 actually, again an intermediate move instead of c takes d. Okay, so here I'll just turn the volume down on the TV just a little bit lower, annoying music in the background. Okay, let's have a look at this position. So bishop d6, Nigel keeps his queen hovering over the king side, which makes this game look kind of, you know, exciting in a way. This queen hovering over here, I think he's had a good success so far. As far as the opening is concerned, it's been great. Okay, Black occupies the centre, but you know, the hypermoderns would delight in this. There's undermining opportunities now, particularly f3. So c takes d5. This occupation, is it really that effective? Is it really doing much? You know, the dynamic aspects, the dynamism for white to bite with f3 and open the f file, and also potentially, you know, this diagonal. It looks dangerous for black here, but at the moment, you know, the knight seems to be safely protecting e4. So is this illusion going to be shattered? So f3. Now bishop e7. Okay, making fe4 not as tempting, you know, with knight e4 discovering an attack on the queen. So bishop b3. Okay, so keeping hold of this option. b6, and now the queen actually goes back to f2. b6, you know, with the idea of maybe bishop a6, is the start of black trying to wrest from white, you know, winning the exchange. But in conjunction with this collapse of the centre, losing the exchange doesn't seem so bad here. Queen f2, bishop a6, and there still starts to be temporary tactical vulnerabilities. Okay, there's a pin on the knight. There's also slightly weakened dark squares, and black seizes hold of this idea of winning the exchange here. After bishop e3, Nigel is gradually preparing in this position the possibility of f takes e4 at the right moment, but clearly here it's not the right moment. But now black, you know, he plays knight h5 with a tactical idea of either bishop h4, bishop e2, and then knight g3. Okay, no worries, no panic. Nigel just accepts the events as they unfold here, where he loses the exchange. He plays f takes e4, because look what he's doing positionally. He's blasting open the f file, making f7 a real, you know, vulnerability. After bishop h4, okay, that's an interesting move, because bishop e2 was also an option. Let's just quickly check if there was any major difference there at this critical juncture. Was it actually better, basically, to have played something else like bishop e2? No, actually Rybka's giving DE with still an advantage. This is much probably the same as the game. Okay, where knight g3 isn't as hot as it appeared. So engine off here. So f takes e4, you know, accepting his position's good enough to handle losing the exchange here. So bishop h4, queen f3. So he doesn't mind this. Bishop takes e2, all very forcing. So queen takes e2, and now losing the exchange, knight g3. First though, I think he improves without moving his queen to somewhere passive. He moves it to g4, in particular threatening bishop takes h6. So if knight takes f1, there's a real threat. Bishop takes h6, threatening mate. So black weakens his position even more now with h5 to stop that. And now the exchange is lost, or is it sacrificed? Two ways of looking at the same event here. Knight takes f1, king takes f1. So if we take time to look at this position, what compensation has white got for the exchange? Is it rather nebulous? Will the calculators amongst you think, you know, black has celebrated better tactical calculation to forcibly win the exchange? Or will the positional people among you think, you know, white's got full compensation for the exchange here? With the white king on f1, does it look kind of strange, this position? It gets even stranger, I assure you, as the king is going to do something very, very interesting very, very soon. Okay, so with h5 under fire and d5 under fire, black's actually got an immediate problem here, not to lose another pawn. He doesn't really want to lose a centre pawn in particular. So actually he accepts losing his h-pawn. But for the moment, okay, materially it's only one pawn for the exchange. Black has 6 pawns, white has 7. But, you know, white has the bishop pair, which can be very, very dangerous. So assessing this position is hard, especially as if black Okay, he's a pawn down for the exchange. His king's slightly weakened by that h5. And these pieces are kind of awkward. The rooks, they really need open files. And in this position, it would seem, if d takes e4 like the game, the rooks haven't really got too many open files to celebrate and revel in. So queen takes h5, still an exchange down for a pawn in this position. Now see, black has 5 pawns, white has 6. Okay, but there might be some serious threats here on the horizon as well. So black actually plays bishop g3. And now Nigel simply puts the question for black to lose material. He plays bishop d5, double attacking that pawn on e4 with the rook on a8. But the question is, surely these bishops are a tactical vulnerability if the bishop ever munches on e4. Well, that's the big question now. How is that question addressed? If white really wants to ambitiously go 2 pawns up for the exchange, down, that's good compensation, but there's tactical vulnerabilities lurking in this position. How are they addressed? So rook c8, bishop takes e4. Well, there's something very, very clever here. After g6, Nigel, obviously he doesn't want to play bishop g6, by the way, fg, and it's check as well as winning the queen. He doesn't need to do anything. He can play this position, the exchange down for 2 pawns. He just needs to liberate these bishops a bit more, make sure these rooks are not going to be devastating on the open files. Then he has already full compensation for the exchange, because he just got to take care of some vulnerabilities in this position. So queen f3, attacking the bishop. Bishop doesn't want to retreat. Queen h4. So maybe f5s are going to be dangerous, or rook e8s, it would seem. But here, Nigel's most celebrated game was a king walk. And it's nice to see a little king walk in this game. Not so glamorous as going to h6, but rather to the centre. Believe it or not, Nigel plays king e2. The idea is to use the king to reinforce the bishop on e4. An incredible idea, an imaginative idea. But how is white defending on the e file with the bishop hitting e1 anyway? So the king walk is kind of nice here, king e2. A very nice creative idea. A hallmark of Nigel's play recently, very innovative and exciting stuff. And I think this game is no exception. This king walk, with the queen still on, the rook's blasting, the exchange down, he's got 2 pawns for it, but he's addressing his tactical vulnerabilities to make sure his full compensation hasn't got any downsides. So rook c8 and now king d3, protecting that bishop from the blasting glare of rook and queen. And if f5, he's always got bishop d5 with tempo because it's check. So rook e7. Can black just increase the pressure on the e-file? That's the question. Well, now Nigel seals against rook e8. He plays bishop c6, which also means now, if given time, he's going to try and maximise the potential of this bishop, currently stuck behind its own pawns. But ideally, I think getting the queens off would also favour white now, to help the pawn's liberation forward here. So king h7, he plays now queen g4, inviting the exchange of queens, and the queen can't move back without losing the bishop. Rook e3s don't do anything, with that e8 square covered. So white has full compensation after that exchange loss, and doesn't mind the double pawns here as well. It would really simplify his task once the queens are off. So black takes the queen off, and now horribly makes matters much, much worse here, because there's an immediate rook h1. I guess Mikhalevski was exhausted here, and this move is terrible, really, really terrible. He should have, according to Rybka anyway, played king g7, but he's still worse here, like d5, big threats now, like pawn moving or bishop d4. And now in this position, even a4, and this would be a nice advantage for white. White doesn't have to do anything too clever, in fact, here. Doesn't have to create too many weaknesses. Just play with his rook on a1. So that would be an advantage to white anyway. But with this f5, it's a quick collapse now, because rook h1 check. Okay, rook h1 check, and you might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, in the game, actually, black thought that king g7 was the best move, which obviously is inviting losing the exchange back. But let's have a quick look. Why king g8? Why wasn't that possible? King g8 here. If king g8, then it's even worse. Engine a bit froze there. Bishop d5 check. So if here, this is even worse. Bishop h6 is just like winning the rook with discovered check for nothing. So the best of the worst here is king g7. So losing the exchange back. But Nigel throws in this bishop d5 check before grabbing that exchange. And now, even worse, after g takes f5, the only move to really king g7, but it's terrible now. Even though it's opposite coloured bishops, white's got so many pawns. King g7, rook h3. So black decides is just a virtual resignation, is just allowing this check. Or maybe he just horrifically blundered again. He's just losing the bishop now because king g7, rook g8. So he had to resign here. If king g7, rook g8 would win the bishop. No problems. So what an interesting game. A detour away from the mainline, Ruy Lopez. The 4 knights variation. Does it have venom with bishop b5? Isn't the sort of stuff Capablanca used to play, just to maybe double pawns or... But yeah, knight d4. I think that's one of the more theoretical moves, actually. So maybe Nigel's pleased when he saw this, because statistically it's doing well for white, this line. So bishop a4. It's still a heavily trodden path. But here, bishop c5, maybe there isn't a need desperately to play knight takes f3 here. So bishop c5 is also apparently kind of popular and doing okay for black. 28.7% wins for black compared with this 19%. So maybe, I don't know, knight f3 doesn't feel as if it's giving white a problem from the opening. Okay, so that's slight lead in development, slight pressure here, slight advantage. It's interesting that black's ambition to get central pawns, they're underminable, but maybe black is factoring in that the problem with undermining with f3 is white will weaken some squares. But to win the exchange with this, I don't know. This looks kind of risky. It didn't turn out right. But is that because of white's ingenious play here as well? Queen g4 was a nice little subtlety, provoking an extra weakness. Okay, and then the brilliancy of this game is this king march to the centre to d3. I've never seen this pattern before. The king supporting a bishop on e4. It looks kind of creative stuff. And it was only now, with the queens off, well, white's getting a bigger material advantage, and in fact winning an entire bishop in this line. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game. It's an interesting alternative, it seems, to the Ruy Lopez to play the 4 knights variation. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.